at the end of class yesterday, I asked the people who were here to try these 4. So I will go through them, but I'll go through them in the context of talking about when I went around and checked the work of the people who were here, what were the things that I noticed. And so that's kind of where I'm going to be focused in on here. So I will first show, this one is pretty similar to the last one I showed in the notes. So I'm going to do this one pretty quickly. I'm going to show this one pretty quickly. This was our hypotenuse, so it should be my square root of 2 side. So we take that s square root of 2. So the leg should be s, and hypotenuse should be s square root of 2. So we take the pattern that goes with that side, we set it equal to what it was given to be, and then we solve. Since there's a square root on the bottom, we want to get rid of the square root on the bottom by multiplying by square root of 2 over square root of 2. And then here's the part that tripped people up yesterday, is that this can be simplified. Remember, I can simplify if they're either both inside the square root or both outside the square root. And most of the time yesterday, we were dealing with both inside the square root. I had square root of 6 divided by square root of 2, and I said I could divide those to be square root of 3. But I can also simplify if they're both outside the square root. So the 20 and the 2 were both outside the square root, so I can make this 20 divided by 2, which is 10 on the outside of the square root, and then there's still a square root of 2 inside. So these should match, and so they're both 10 square root of 2. This one, most people found fairly easy, so I won't go through it in too much detail. This was the hypotenuse, so this had a square root of 2 attached to it, so to get the square root of 2 off of it, we just needed to divide, and they cancel, and it's just 13, and they both match, so they're both 13. Done. Next. This one was tricky. Now we're getting to the tougher ones. 2 things that were tricky for people. First off, because this had a square root of 2 on it, a lot of people jumped to, oh, this is the hypotenuse, so the other ones are just 2. Nope. Because this is a leg. This is what was used to build the right angle. So my square root of 2 side goes on the hypotenuse, which is here. So this is my hypotenuse, and so this will need a square root of 2 attached to it. So that means the legs should match, so this should be 2 square root of 2. And the hypotenuse should take my leg, which is 2 square root of 2, and tack a square root of 2 onto it. So taking my leg and multiplying it by square root of 2. And then here was thing number 2 that people had trouble with, was simplifying this. So simplifying this, remember, everything outside the square root, multiply it, which is just 2. And then take everything inside the square root and multiply it. And if I take everything inside the square root, that is square root of 2 times square root of 2, which is 2. We drilled that at the end of last week on our whiteboards. I did that over and over again. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is just 2. Square root of 3 times square root of 3, it's 3. Square root of 5 times square root of 5, it's 5. Because that's going to come up fairly often, and 2 times 2 is 4. So we should get 4 here, and then 2 square root of 2 to match the other 2 square root of 2. Right. Last one, and I'm going to walk through the steps here. So we're going to label with our pattern. So our hypotenuse is across from our right angle here. Our hypotenuse should have a square root of 2 tacked onto it. And then my other 2 sides should match. My 2 legs should match with each other. So once I know one, I know the other. What side am I given? I'm given this one. So I'm going to take what my pattern says and set it equal to what I'm given. So I'm setting my pattern for that side equal to the side that I'm given. Then I solve by dividing by square root of 2 on both sides. Okay? That's the end of the geometry and 45, 45, 90 part of the problem. Now we're in the simplifying the square roots part of the problem. In the simplifying the square roots part of the problem, we need to multiply by square root of 2 on top and bottom. As a third day, I'm going to go over why to do this. This is multiplying by 1. Anything times 1 is itself, so I'm not changing the number by multiplying by 1. I'm writing 1 in this way, square root of 2 over square root of 2, because our goal is to get rid of the square root on the bottom. And on the bottom, doing this gives me, on the bottom, square root of 2 times square root of 2, which is still 2. No more square root on the bottom. That was my goal. Then on the top, everything outside the square root, just a 3. Everything inside the square root, I have square root of 3 times the square root of 2. That's the square root of 6. So 3 square root of 6 over 2. Can I simplify that anymore? No, I can't. Because I can only divide both outside the square root or both inside the square root. Outside the square root, I have a 3 over 2. Can't simplify. I cannot divide something in the square root with something out of the square root. Just like I can't multiply something in the square root with something out of the square root. They either have to both be outside or both be inside. So, since u and v both match up with s and have to match that, u is going to be 3 root 6 over 2. And v is going to be 3 root 6 over 2. And that's our final answer. So those are our 45, 45, 90 patterns. I don't want to spend too long on that today because we talked in detail about the 45, 45, 90 patterns yesterday. I want to focus on 30, 60, 90 today. All right. How did that end up there? Hold on. Here. There we go. All right. I'm going to show this kind of quickly, just so that you see where the pattern comes from. I showed you the pattern with the 45, 45, 90. Here's your pattern with our next one, which is 30, 60, 90. That's the main one we're talking about today. The 30, 60, 90 comes from equilateral triangles. So first off, remember, equilateral means that all the sides are the same. So let's say that this side is 6. Well, that means this side is 6 and this side is 6. That also means that all the angles are the same. So these are all 60 degrees. 60 because all the angles in the triangle add to 180. So if all three have to be the same, that means each one is 60 apiece for it to add to 180. So what I'm going to do to create my 30, 60, 90 triangle is I'm going to drop down a height that will cut the triangle in half. So what I'm doing here is I'm making a perpendicular bisector. Perpendicular, it's going to make a right angle. There's your right triangle. Bisector, it's going to cut it in half. That's what bisecting does. It's a word you should know. Up here, it cuts the angle in half. It makes this 30 and this 30. Down here, it cuts the side in half and makes this 3 and this 3. So, right now, we have the first part of our pattern for 30, 60, 90, which is that between the hypotenuse and my shorter leg, right, so this is my hypotenuse, this is my short leg. So that's across from the 30-degree angle is my short leg. To get from my short leg to the hypotenuse, I just need to double the short leg. So if I know that my short leg is 3, then the hypotenuse should be double it, which is 6. Then, to figure out what my long leg is, my long leg is across from my 60. I'll call it H because I dropped it down as a height. I'm going to do Pythagorean Theorem. And I'll do it quickly because we should be comfortable with Pythagorean Theorem. Hypotenuse was 6. 3 squared plus h squared. 9 and h squared. Let's simplify that square root. Pair of 3's can come out of the square root. And then I have a 3 by itself that stays in the square root. So this is 3, square root of 3. So to get my long leg, here's what the pattern is going to be. To get my long leg, I'm going to take that short leg, which is 3, and multiply it by square root of 3. So my pattern is all going to come from my short leg, which is across from the 30-degree angle. I'm going to double it to get the hypotenuse. I'm going to multiply by square root of 3 to get my longer leg. So here's how that's going to look. This is the part that goes in your notes. So it comes from splitting that equilateral triangle in half. So let's talk about a couple things as we take this down here. When I say short leg and long leg, remember how we talked about in the hypotenuse? We look across from the right angle to get my hypotenuse. Well, to get my short leg, we look across from the 30-degree angle. And to get my long leg, we look across from the 60-degree angle. And we'll talk about this more next week when we talk about trig. But that means that across from my smallest angle is going to be my shortest side. Across from the bigger angle is going to be my longer leg. And across from the biggest angle, the 90-degree angle, is going to be my longest side, the hypotenuse. So the short leg is across from the smallest angle. Across from my 30. And the pattern this time is that if my short leg is S, then my hypotenuse is going to be double it. So sometimes you'll hear me call the hypotenuse the one that you double. Or you'll hear me call it 2S, 2 times the short leg. And then my long leg, take my short leg and multiply it by square root of 3. So you're going to see me do the same process that we were doing with the 45, 45, 90. The difference is that it's going to be with a different pattern. All right, so to take, again, we'll start with a basic example here. Here's 60, here's 30. So for example, if I know this is 2, then if it's a quick and easy problem, remember this is my short leg. And so the hypotenuse is double it. And to get the long leg, I know it's the long leg because it's across from the 60. To get the long leg, I take my short leg and multiply by square root of 3. And I found all 3 sides, done. Right, that's how quick some of these problems can go. It is just following that pattern. Let's keep going. Let's see a few more. And then I'll let you try some. Here's what we're going to do. This is 60. That means this one is my 30. So across from that 30 should be my short leg. Across from the 60 should be my long leg. So that's S squared of 3. Long leg is S squared of 3. That's my pattern. Take my short leg and multiply by square root of 3. And then my pattern for the hypotenuse across from the right angle is to double it. So we're going to follow the same steps that we were just doing, but with a new pattern. So what am I given? I'm given this. So there's my equation. I'm going to take what the pattern says there, 2s, and set it equal to what I'm given, which is 6 root 2. So to solve for s, I'm going to divide by 2. Which ones am I going to cancel? I'm going to cancel the ones that are both outside the square root. I'm not going to cancel something outside with something inside. So I'm going to take 6 divided by 2, and that's 3 outside the square root. And then we still have a 2 inside the square root. So then filling in the rest of my pieces, this is my short leg. Right, you can remember S for your short leg. This is my short leg, so my short leg was y. That's going to be 3 root 2. And then x says, take my short leg and multiply it by square root of 3. So I'm going to take that short leg, 3 root 2, and multiply it by root 3. Everything outside the square root, that's just 3. And then here I have square root of 2 times square root of 3, which will be square root of 6. And we can think about these in a similar way that we were thinking about the problems yesterday. So if I want to think about it a different way, you can think about, remember the hypotenuse was double my short leg. So I had to double to get to 6 root 2. So what would I have needed to double to get to 6 root 2? 3 root 2. If I take 3 root 2 and double it, I get to 6 root 2. So that's my short leg. And then to get my long leg, I take that 3 root 2 multiplied by root 3. That's my pattern. Let's watch it happen again. This one's going to be easier. The big thing is to make sure you are labeling and seeing your pattern correctly. Where's my short leg? It's across from the 30, which should be here. So across from my 30, here's my short leg. Label it S. Where's my hypotenuse? It's across from the right angle, which should be here. I'm going to label it 2S. That's my doubling. Where's my long leg? It's across from the 60, which should be here. So that's my S square root of 3. That's my pattern. So what am I given? I'm given this side. So I'm going to set what the pattern says there, S root 3. I'm going to set it equal to what I'm given, 2 root 3. So we have S times the square root of 3. So to solve for S, we're going to divide by square root of 3 on both sides. And that's good news because they're both inside the square root. And square root of 3 divided by square root of 3, that's going to cancel. And the square root goes away, and we just have 2. This is why this one is easier. Because there's less square root stuff going on this time. So that means my short leg is 2. That's why. And then all I need to do for my hypotenuse, which is x, my hypotenuse, I just need to take that 2 and double it, which is 4. Done. I want to pause here for about 30 seconds. And I want you to try and label this one. Before I set up the equation and before I label it, I want to give you a chance to try and label it. Remember, the pattern should be S and then 2S and S squared root of 3. So your job is to pick out which one goes where. You should also, on the homework, you should keep a close eye on, do I have a 30, 60, 90 like this one? Do I have a 45, 45, 90? So that decides which pattern I'm going to use. And you can tell that most of the time from what the angles are in front of you. Notice these all have 60-degree angles, so probably a 30, 60, 90. The other ones all had 45-degree angles labeled on it, so that was a 45, 45, 90. If it's not 30, 60, 90 or 45, 45, 90, then you're probably going to end up using Pythagorean Theorem, which is what we talked about last week. Anytime I know two sides and don't know the third side, it's Pythagorean theorem to the rescue. So those are kind of the three main tools that we're going to have. And most of the problems are going to be Pythagorean theorem that we talked about earlier. All right. Let's see how we did in labeling these. Short leg should be opposite the 30. So here's my 30. Across from it, here's S. Here's my hypotenuse that's across from the right angle. This should be 2S. Here's the 60. Across from it should be my long leg, S square root of 3. My guess is that we might have mixed these two up. Remember, across from my 30 should be my short leg. And across from the 60 should be my long leg. Which side am I given? This one. I'm given this as 8 square root of 3. So I'm going to take what the pattern says, which is S, and then I'm going to set it equal to 8 square root of 3. And then I'm going to solve that equation. Well, already done. I'm so good at solving equations that are already solved. All right. Now that we've solved it, let's plug in for the rest of our pieces. So to get x, we're going to take that short leg, S, and the pattern says to take that S and double it. Everything outside the square root, we have 2 times 8, which is 16. Everything inside the square root, just square root of 3. Y is, the pattern says, take my short leg. There's my short leg. The pattern says take that short leg and multiply it by square root of 3. Everything outside the square root, that's just 8. Everything inside the square root. Inside the square root, we have square root of 3 times square root of 3. And square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just 3. Just like square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. Square root of 5 times square root of 5 is 5. That's why we spent so much time with square roots last week, to get you used to working with those ideas with square roots. And 8 times 3 is 24. So hypotenuse was double the short leg. Long leg, we multiplied it by square root of 3. And then did some simplifying with square roots. So I showed some of these as kind of shortcuts, and then some of these as this kind of longer step-by-step process. So that might depend on like your comfort level with these problems and how complicated the problem is. And so if you like that kind of step-by-step process and you want those steps, here's my best attempt at kind of phrasing how those steps go. Step 1, label your pattern with S. So for 45, 45, 90, that's going to be S, S, and S root 2. Right, so that's the first thing we did, was make sure we labeled our correct pattern. For 30, 60, 90, that's going to be S, 2S, and S root 3. Okay, so whatever pattern we have. Step 2 is figure out which side are you given. I showed that by circling it. I circled the pattern and I circled the side that we were given. Then we said, set that thing that you were given equal to how you labeled it, the thing with S. So the way I was phrasing that earlier is set your pattern for that side equal to what you were given for that side. In other words, the two things that I circled, we're setting them equal to each other. Solve the equation. Simplify if you need to. And then finally, we're going to plug in to the other sides for S. And again, simplify with the square roots and stuff if we need to. We're going to plug in with our pattern to figure out what the other sides are. So if you like seeing that kind of step-by-step process and having something to follow for that, then that's what it looks like.